a lot of this at the moment, aren't we? Everywhere we go, there's tape on the floor to help guide us, to keep us safe, and to keep other people safe as well. I'm even tempted to use some of this around the house sometimes. I don't know if you've got to that stage in your house with the people you live with, but the temptation to say, you just stay that side of the room or that side of the study in our case. Well, there we are. Maybe your house is a scene of domestic bliss all of the time. I can't say ours is, unfortunately. Paul writes the letters to Timothy towards the end of his life. He's in prison. Timothy is helping to lead the church in Ephesus, and he's writing really to give warnings and encouragement to Timothy so that he can help keep the church safe, so that he can help keep it going in the right direction. He talks about how the overarching theme is love. And this comes from a pure heart and a good conscience and a sincere faith, he writes in the first chapter after the initial introduction. He's wanting Timothy to continue in the way of love, avoiding things on either side. He's strong on helping the church to avoid false teaching and myths and genealogies and all kinds of other distractions. And that's why he writes to Timothy about the importance of rooting themselves in worship, of remembering that God is God and we are not. We are his creation, designed to give praise and to express our wonder as to who God is, to have him in first place always. And it's also a very practical letter about leadership in the church, about making sure that people are honoured, dealing with specific problems in a specific context about who should and shouldn't speak and how money should be viewed. It's important, but it can't be the main driver and the thing that runs us. No, we run money and use it for our own purposes and for our good. We don't let it get control over us, which it's trying to do all of the time. So there's lots that's about outward and practical stuff. But at the heart of this letter, and the stuff that Paul returns to again and again, is the inward stuff. That's what really counts. That's what helps to keep us on the straight path. That's what helps to keep us sure to count with God, in tight relationship with him, and to be loving one another as well. Don't know if you've ever read any books on leadership. There's loads published about Christian leadership, just as much as any other kind of leadership. But where Paul wants to focus the attention when he writes to his beloved son, Timothy, not his biological son, but someone who's become like a child to him in ministry, someone he's poured his life and wisdom into. As Paul writes to Timothy, he says, Timothy, it's not really what's on the outside that's of ultimate importance. No, it's what's on the inside. Because it's what's on the inside that will govern and inform and resource what comes out, what's on the outside. So resist the temptation, Timothy, to focus on the external stuff, the status, but focus on the inward stuff. And again, as you read through the letter to Timothy, the first letter to Timothy, you'll see how even as Paul talks about kind of order of ministries within the church, the focus is all on the inward stuff, because that's what counts. Too often we get wrapped up about position when actually Paul is talking about character and what's going on underneath. Too often we get concerned about the outward trappings and kind of what's right in this situation. And Paul wants to say that is important, but don't forget the importance of the internal stuff. Now, I don't know about you, but I find that quite intimidating because there's always a gap between the outward and the inward stuff. Well, Paul recognizes that, but what he says to Timothy is carry on trying to reduce that gap between what's on the outside and the inward. There's always a gap, of course there is, but allow the Spirit of God to work within you to diminish that gap. One of the tendencies of leadership, the longer we go on even, is that that gap becomes bigger and bigger, and no one sees initially. We can fool people, we get quite good at pretending, but Paul says to Timothy, don't ever pretend to other people, and especially to yourself, because you can never trick God. You take that gap seriously and work hard to decrease that gap, even if people aren't noticing. Take it seriously and decrease that gap. He talks then to Timothy about fighting the good fight. Stay true to who you are, to who God has made you to be, to whose you are, beloved in Christ. And as you remain firm, then you'll be able to lead other people out of that place of security, of knowing whose you are. And as you work within yourself to decrease that gap, to warn other people, to resist those who are only interested in the outward stuff. So, a fascinating insight into the nature of leadership and into the nature of Paul's ministry with all of the kind of outward success that he. What's his priority? It's the inward stuff. That's what counts. So, 1 Timothy, lots to explore there about what it means to be a disciple, and particularly to be a disciple with influence over other people.